Welcome to Command Control Power, the longest-running Apple consulting podcast. For over a decade, we've delivered weekly episodes filled with epic tech support stories, troubleshooting insights, discussions about managing clients and businesses, and interviews with industry colleagues and vendors, all tailored for our pro listeners. We also offer exclusive content through Patreon. This private podcast feed is designed specifically for IT professionals, providing valuable advice and guidance on tackling the more complex aspects of running your practice, working with clients and employees, and managing device fleets. With a modest monthly contribution, you'll gain access to a wealth of advanced Apple expertise, meaningful connections, and a community driven by a shared passion for Apple technology. Visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support to learn more. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to another episode of Command Control Power. Good to see you both. How are you both doing?
Nice to see you, Joe.
Yeah.
Joe, you're going through a drought. You were sending Sam and I some communiques about how bad things are in the
Yeah. In case
West.
You guys thought I was joking or exaggerating in some way on a recent show when I was talking about it, it was a matter of a couple days later and I'm walking, it was a Saturday, it was last weekend, Saturday, I'm walking home from doing some work at a coffee shop and I step outside and I look up and there's smoke billowing from the local park in front of the Flatiron Mountains here in Boulder. And yeah, sure enough, another fire, very small, contained, I think it was like an acre and a half, maybe 2 acres at most at its peak. They dropped water 7 times or something when I last checked on it and still smoldering and then eventually out, of course. But we had a little rain today, so that's a good thing, but it was as if you needed further confirmation that things are a little weird when we've been in the 60s and 70 degree weather in the middle of February. That was the visual indicator that we might have needed. But I sent you an article as well because the concern starts to compound the longer this goes on. And then as we get into spring and summer, especially, and there's no snowpack, the snow acts as like essentially a reservoir for many places out west. Yeah. And it melts in the spring and summer, and then you have water sources. And so that's a concern if that doesn't happen. So yeah. Here we are. Yeah, Mike Kingsley in the chat is saying Utah is pretty screwed also. So yeah.
It's bad news.
Yeah, it's concerning. It's good to see that they can put it out quickly and respond quickly, but all that has to happen is something like that at the wrong time with high winds, and it spreads much more quickly. So
it's so early in the season too, which really all bets are off, right? Come June or July. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's the concern. But it's a good driver of the prepper market. And so maybe it'll be good for my new endeavor that I was sharing a little bit on the Patreon episode. But for those who missed it or haven't heard the episode yet, in the feed, it's a website that I recently launched. It's a very soft launch, really just to you guys and my patrons, or our patrons, and a couple of friends of mine. It's called psykit.com, PSIKIT.com. I'll put it.
Are you sure it's not called daylightmac.com, Joe?
Ding.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, no, it's a website I've owned for a while, and I decided to put it to use in this way, selling these mesh-tastic devices, these little mesh communicators that I talked about at length in that Patreon episode. And a couple years ago, before ACES, we talked about it. And then, sure enough, Adam Rice showed up at ACES with one of the units I had recommended. Sam had one as well. So it's psykit.com in case anybody's interested. Really, I want to just drive a little bit more understanding of this before ACES in a few months. Well, actually, really a couple months now as we speak. So PSIKIT.com for the listeners out there. And let me know if you have any questions. I'm not trying to make sales. I'm more just trying to promote the idea of mesh communication. And I gave the whole context of why I think that's important. And the fire is one of those examples.
Yeah. Speaking of Mike Kingsley, he said the whole West is not in good shape either. I was just thinking, we were involved in a project that happened to be bigger than we could do, kind of someone that needed to come in and certify a network and do all this stuff. And that's just not something we're capable of doing. And this organization, which I've talked about before, like senior living centers, they have a board and all this stuff that we have to talk to. And this gentleman came in to do the project for that could do the network certification project, and he happens to be buddies with someone on the board, so he's like coming in as a bigwig kind of guy.
He's coming in hot.
Yeah, and he's kind of leading the meetings and starting to give a little direction, like even for stuff that I feel like I know how to do. And I was going to say this for Patreon, but what the heck? But I was all like hot and bothered after the call because I felt like someone was acting as my boss in a way.
Yeah.
Someone that telling me what to do and all stuff. And I was telling Matt after the call, I was like, I'm really annoyed at this guy. I'm complaining. He's like, dude, it sounds like you just got outbossed. You're just mad that you got outbossed on a personal level. And I was like, this is my employee calling me out. I was like, oh man, I think he's right. Like it was less of a, because the person had to take charge of some things because of what he was doing. This was all personal, not a technical thing. I just felt like someone was coming in over my head and I was getting a little pissed about it. And I didn't until he made me look inside myself and be like, you're just mad that this person's coming in over you, that I realized, oh, it's probably not a big deal. I just didn't like the way he did it. We've all worked on projects with other vendors and things of that nature. Have you ever had a situation like that where someone comes in as acting as like, you, Joe, you do this, you do that, kind of a situation where that aggravates you, or you, Jerry?
I can't say I've had that same kind of experience, thankfully. A lot of times it's just like more equal footing with colleagues that we're collaborating on a project with. And I try to come at that from, I'll defer to them on this when it's like relevant to them. And then sometimes I have to walk that back if I actually think that I want to like direct something more than defer to someone else. But no, I can imagine that happening though, where someone is acting that role more. And then it's just a feeling of, hey.
I know. I was like annoyed.
Right.
But it was just because as business owners, I think we're just used to running our own show and nobody tells me what to do. It's a situation like that. So I think it was just that kind of a personal feeling more than anything.
What's one of the things that he did that you guys just didn't want to get involved with? Like in terms of network certification, what was one of his tentpoles that he provided?
Good question.
I mean, what was the value that he was bringing that HCS didn't?
Oh, this network is a total mess, just in terms of the intricacy and how the original network team that ran it didn't even care about Ethernet wiring lengths and having like switches on different floors so that you wouldn't run past the 300 length and things like that. So we're now having to fix a lot of things in a building that's already structured. And so there's contract work that needs to be done there, but also there's actual network certification that we're highly suggesting, because basically everything is unlabeled. We don't know where most of the cabling goes. And so you're guessing at this game with like hundreds of wires. So network certification they'll tone it out, first of all, and label everything to make sure that everything is properly known. And then also just certifying the actual Ethernet cables that they're fully functional for Ethernet, for network traffic and PoE and all the stuff, so that we can plug something in knowing it's going to actually work, or replace the lines if we have to. So that like actual certification is something that we just don't do. They actually provide a certificate that says your network is certified for whatever the cabling is.
Interesting.
So we had to hire a team, and it's a big job.
I would for something like that too. It's just like the nest of like potential problems, and like being the last one who touched it kind of thing is always the issue there with it's like it was working and then you came in and you made it better, but like also this whole side of the building's down. So
that happened.
Hey, it's mostly working great, but except for that half.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah. I wish I had hired somebody for this.
Yeah. And I just don't want to, it just makes us look bad because we're like, hey, this is a big problem. We agree with you. We just need something better to be done here that we don't do.
Totally.
And what did it take besides having a friend on the board that was familiar with the certification company? What influence did it take to get them to arrive at this point? Because I would think most clients are like, we see the value, but we don't want to pay for the value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great that you got there.
No, you're totally right. It just took, things started to happen though. The network was starting to deteriorate piece by piece, like we couldn't deliver meds on time. And that's obviously a big deal.
Yeah.
And things like that, we're like, and when they tell us that, it's not like I've gone past the point of saying, okay, try and fix this. I'm saying, yes, we know, fix it. We have the answer. You just have to listen. So I think it was a lot of that where they could have either fired us because they said, no, you keep telling us to do something else. You guys are the tech guys. Or they can say, these guys are right. Maybe we should do this. And thankfully, they took that approach that was like, we trust them. We think they're right. And it's not even I'm going to make any money. It's not for any benefit for me. It's pay somebody else to do this. And we're going to make it so much better. And I think that helps when I'm not like, let me bring in my guy who's going to charge you $20,000. That's a little different. That gets a different feeling out of people.
Yeah, totally. I've had that one recently too, where there's been a client with a Mac Mini server, one of those, and I've given the reasons why. It makes sense in this case. They have FileMaker, they use it as like a screen sharing like kind of system and all this. So it makes sense to have a Mac in addition to file sharing. We have those other features, and we've been recommending now for a while, probably a year and a half, like flagging this, like this is going to be due for replacement soon. And I was just reviewing back in July, we had the conversation. I think it was the last time we really had the specific conversation, like this needs to be a priority. This is going to happen soon. And they're like, okay, it's a budget thing, but they're on board. And then sure enough, a few months later, a drive fails in the RAID, in the attached promise RAID. So no big surprise. It's RAID 6, like it's fine. So we replaced the drive. And then 3 months later, just like a week ago, second drive fails in the same unit. So now originally it was like drive 4, then it was drive 6 that failed. And the drives got to be more expensive in those 3 months because we're also dealing with like basically drives that are a specific model that we had to source to replace with, and they're going up in price. And so this was our little prompt, like you're describing, Sam, where like stuff happens, we flag it, we let them know, and then we go with, this is a good reason that we were saying, like, we need to work on this. So the good news is from my side that the client is totally on board with knowing we need to do this. They don't need a third drive to fail to see this. But in this case, it is promoting ourselves essentially, because we're going to be the ones that we don't make money on the hardware, but we're going to be giving them a whole list of things they need to order. And then of course the labor for us to do the work to migrate to the new server. But it's clearly not an elective thing. The server is a number of years old. In fact, I was looking at the details, and so I have this fresh, and I'll just tell you guys, it's a 2018 Mac Mini. So it's the last Intel model. It will not run Tahoe. So we already know that's a ticking timeline right there. In fact, last year, Apple announced that this model is vintage. They consider all the Intel Mac Minis to be vintage. This was the newest one, which still counts as vintage, apparently. Vintage means that Apple stopped distributing it for sale more than 5 years ago and less than 7 years ago. So the interesting thing is here, we bought this as a refurb because we needed it in a pinch back in 2021. So it was already 3 years old by date of release, and we knew what we were getting into. And here we are now, essentially 5 years later, and it's end of life, or it's near end of life, which is a shorter timeline than you'd hope. But again, that's because it's a refurb, or was a refurb when it was purchased. So it's a 2018 Mac Mini. It has 2 Promise RAIDs. One is the main storage and one is a backup locally. And then we, of course, have an offsite backup as well. Those Promise enclosures were upgraded to brand new hard drives to increase the capacity back in 2018. So these drives are now 8 years old that are sitting there, again, ticking time bombs in each of these RAIDs. Can anyone guess how old the Promise RAID enclosures are? They are the Pegasus 2 R6 models. They were originally purchased. No, older.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
2014?
2011.
Oh, my
we
God.
Installed them. Yeah.
Oh
You're talking 15 years for this hardware. That is pretty exceptional. It's been good in terms of speed. It's been good enough, but there's definitely going to be some gains there. And clearly, I've been concerned for quite a while now. On the positive side, it's, look, we know how old these are. If they fail without notice, like the enclosure just won't turn on, we do have the second, like this, the backup is essentially a clone. So we have that. We could spin that up pretty quickly if it's the main one that fails. And presumably we could buy like a replacement enclosure on eBay or something and try to overnight it or whatever if we had to. So that was the worst case scenario, but clearly it's time to upgrade all this hardware. But that just gives you like a data point that sometimes people can really stretch the useful life of quality hardware anyway, when you up-spec it from the beginning.
Joe, I think I might know who this client is. And so do you want to mention anything about the timeline of this client in terms of the running of the business and how many years? Because that factors into it too. when people make
I
these
thought Jerry
decisions.
wanted to mention details of the client.
The name. Yeah. So I've been working with this client now for probably 23 years, I would say. Now my business is approaching 22 years in business. So how does the math work on that? When I started, I was sitting in a coffee shop one day, as I do. I seem to refer to this once per episode. Now this was back in Connecticut. I was back there sitting in probably my hometown when I first started my business. I was sitting in a Starbucks, and this client walked in and they were hanging some artwork or something like that. And they noticed me and I noticed them, and we caught up and we said, hello, how are things going? And I said, I left that company. I'm out on my own. And they pretty soon thereafter hired me. So it was one of those, I had worked for an Apple specialist prior to starting my company, and I had seen this client even when I was working with that Apple specialist. So this goes back again, 23 years or something like that.
So you were moonlighting.
No, I worked for that company and they sent me to this client. And then after I left the company, I ran into the client and they said, hey, what are you up to? And I'm doing that same work and I'm just doing it for myself. So they hired me and I've been working with them ever since. Yeah.
But if I understand the story correctly, you met them while they were hanging artwork in the Starbucks that you were working?
They had hung some photography there.
Oh, yeah. So that's why you have such an affinity for coffee shops. You might think you might get some new business each time you walk.
Exactly. Yeah. It's definitely, it's been a source. These days, I don't actively avoid, but I don't actively pursue getting new business in person because I don't like doing on-site work. I've been fully remote for so long that I've just focused on my clientele back in the Northeast mainly. We have people everywhere now. I have a client in Utah, actually, speaking of Utah, and they moved from Connecticut at one point. And so it's just very casual. It's a high-end residential user. We moved a server, they moved the server that they're using as a backup server for several devices and things like that. When they moved, we remotely set up the Wi-Fi network, specing equipment. They had somebody install it. So it's little stuff like that as it comes up. But yeah, it just goes to show you that people can really be anywhere these days.
Yeah, it's true.
But the point of my question was that when a client needs to do a large expenditure like this, I have a manufacturing client, actually, they're custom builders, and they're probably roughly around my age, very old. Anytime they need to make some computer decision for expenses, and we're not talking about a lot of money. I tell my clients, all day long, you're on your computer. And if you can increase your own productivity or employees' productivity, whatever we're going to spend, it's a drop in the bucket. And people still have real problems understanding that. But in this particular case where you're talking about replacing those promised rates, aren't we talking about a client who's at retirement or near retirement?
Yeah, exactly. We touched on this topic a little bit as a tease of something like Sam and I have both talked about. And Jerry, I'm sure you have similar examples of this kind of thing where clients are, I don't know if it sounds too crass or something to say, aging out. Clients get past the point of retirement where they're just not interested in maintaining multiple computers in multiple places, or they no longer have an office, or they no longer have a business. And so over time, they stop investing in technology to the same degree, and they stop hiring us for the same amount of time and however else our revenue is affected. Yeah. It's a great point. And they're maybe looking at a timeline of, this has come up, not with this particular client, but with a different photography client where when they were getting close to retirement, they started to look at this. Can I not buy a new RAID? They had a similar setup with just a workstation, but with a dedicated RAID because they had so much historical archives and current work in progress and things like that. And they'd have calls from their clients wanting to purchase a photo from 10 years ago or something, or review a shoot from 10 years ago, whatever it is. And so they're maintaining all this infrastructure. And then as time goes on, it takes a lot of careful thought from the client to think about how will things change for them. And a lot of times they just say, can we just get rid of this stuff? And I'm like, sure, but do you need the data? That might sound like a stupid question, but have you thought about, sure, you're not going to be getting these calls and selling as many prints, or you're not going to be having as many incoming shoots, but you still have all this stuff you have. What of that do you need? And can we think about spending $2,400 or whatever it is to boost a MacBook Pro to 8 terabytes, but maybe that's a better solution than infrastructure on your desk for the rest of your life. So really good points to think about that when these things come up for these types of clients.
Joe's avoiding my question.
Wait, what? Okay, go ahead. Try me again.
Stands for the question.
Yeah, just answer the question. The
Yeah,
Dow
but
is
the Dow. Yeah, Jerry, the Dow.
So what was
But
the
in this-
question?
Yeah, what is the question that I'm missing? In?
So specifically, Joe, in this particular case, where you're telling us about the client who is at retirement age or approaching a retirement age, is this a consideration in them wanting to do anything in terms of upgrading their infrastructure, or just have you keep on putting Band-Aids on it and limp along?
Oh, I don't think that's even a viable alternative. I think they realize at this point that 15-year-old RAID enclosures, I literally, the way I delivered it to you guys, I spelled it out for them in an email, just so you have all the facts in front of you. Here's where we stand. As you can see, we've been concerned for a little while, and now, second drive failed in 3 months. Like it could only get worse from here, but I didn't say it like that, but clearly that's the implication. I don't think that they expect we'll just keep limping along. They said to me, they know they have to do this, and they asked for a proposal, because I've been saying also I've prepared a proposal at some point in the past, and like they weren't ready to move on it, so I'm not going to update it every 6 months unless they're ready to actually move. So they're asking for that proposal to be updated now. As an alternative in this case, I don't think they're even looking at changing the infrastructure and simplifying. It's more, okay, let's refresh the whole system. Let's keep all the things, the services we have access to, let's keep that going strong. But this might be the last big investment in the server infrastructure, because when they retire, they'll want to have access to this stuff, and they'll probably, even in retirement, still be doing more work, but less. But so they'll just be like pushing this equipment less hard, but they'll still need it at that point.
Does that answer your question, Jerry?
Yeah, Jerry, that's my third and final try. So
Yeah, it does indeed. My question to you, follow-up question might be, so what do you propose just generally? Would it be another Mac Mini and another RAID?
yeah, I looked at this when I last looked at it last year. I'm like, there's got to be better, like newer Promise. They're up to, I think at the time it's like the Promise 32 or something, like Pegasus 32 or whatever. They have the 6 and the 8 bay models. At one point, Apple supported all of this and recommended it, and it was for sale in the Apple Store. I don't even think that's the case anymore, at least the last I checked. And I hadn't seen like a real refresh from Promise in a while, so I wasn't sure if, like, my original plan would be, I just need direct attach RAIDs primarily. Promise is my go-to unless anybody has any recommendations there. But certainly 15 years with those enclosures, like that's a pretty darn good track record. I don't see any reason to move to a different company. Again, zooming out, why not go with the Synology for network attached storage? And that would be your server. We need the ability to connect to the system to load photos libraries that are stored, thousands of photos libraries, each one several gigabytes of data, like each one represents a shoot. That's just their workflow. That's what they've developed over all these years. Prior to this, it was iPhoto, believe it or not, professional photography practice relying on now Photos app with individual libraries for each shoot. That's just their whole workflow. It presents really well to the client, to their clients, so they want to maintain that. For years, I looked at other alternatives. I can't even think of them offhand now, but other workflows, and we just ruled those out, and we're sticking with this. Since Apple does not support opening a Photos library over the network, over network attached storage, they really never have, but like for a while it worked with little glitches here and there. At one point, they actively restricted it, or at least it seemed that they did. So they not only said this is not supported, but this is not possible. So if you went to open a Photos library and it's living on an SMB storage device on the network, it just wouldn't open. So I'm not quite sure what the status of that is, but the only supportable workflow really I've determined, again, per Apple's own advice, is to have a attached storage. So this would be the Promise RAID, direct attached storage on, in this case, let's say a Mac Mini, maybe we go Mac Studio, looking at, again, the long longevity of the system, with machines connecting over the network using screen sharing. So you're essentially opening a local session that's sitting right there on the Mac Mini that's hosting all of these multiple sessions, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time from different workstations. So Mac Mini or Mac Studio, Promise RAIDs, direct attached storage, local backup, obviously, probably upgrade. We've been looking to upgrade to a 10 gig Ethernet connection, again, to support multiple clients. The faster Thunderbolt 5 connection will help. And obviously brand new hard drives, brand new backhaul, or basically like the RAID controller in the Promise RAIDs all of this stuff will be much faster. So there's not much else to it in terms of how to spec it. It's just really a new version of what we have.
Are there any other players out there? This potentially would be something that any of us could revisit at any point. And I would probably think the same way. But yeah, is there anybody out there that does what Promise does? Other than going with an OWC product, which we know is not enterprise.
So yeah, other than ruling that out entirely, because I agree. As much as they might say it has enterprise drives inside or whatever, I don't trust their hardware really anymore.
Right.
Not for years. I haven't even really tried it in years, but the last few examples I had and like things I've heard, I'm just not even it's not on my radar. Other examples, G-Tech. I actually have a client who went out and bought. They replaced it with the Promise at one point, but before they had a Promise RAID, similar like RAID 6 or whatever, 6-bay array, they had the G-Speed, I think it was called, and I think it was a 4-bay RAID. So it has its own local controller. Because OWC, they bought SoftRAID, they make enclosures that they call RAIDs, but they're really software-based RAIDs. Like the Mac is the RAID controller, essentially. And furthermore, it's SoftRAID running on the Mac. So again, I don't really look at that as a viable solution these days, but G-Speed has a RAID that's like a 4-bay, and I think you can configure it as RAID 5. I think out of the box, a lot of these things are RAID 0, which is like, are you kidding me? What's your support line? Why do you do this to yourself, selling someone a RAID 0 enclosure and calling it a 20 terabyte enclosure or whatever it is when it's comprised of 4 or 5 terabyte drives, any one of which could fail and bring the whole system down? That does not sound like a good plan. But I think you can, like in one case, I know you can configure it as RAID 1 plus 0 or something. So it's 2 RAID 0s and then they're mirrored. So you still have some redundancy. But certainly RAID 6 is preferred. And I believe they make a RAID 6, if I'm not mistaken. That's the only other one, if they're still called, that comes to mind, G-RAID or G-Speed.
Interesting too. And I remember one of the things with OWC was, you couldn't get extended RAID, like you couldn't get RAID 5 unless you bought, even though it comes with the software, you had to upgrade the soft RAID. There was an upsell there.
There was, for sure.
It's so sleazy.
It's just silly too, because you get these calls from people, I'm getting this notice about I have to buy a new version of SoftRAID because like my Mac updated itself. And it's not the right model. They're selling you hardware and they're saying it can do all these things, but then you don't realize you actually need to pay essentially not a subscription to SoftRAID, but you need to buy it again every few years just to keep the same hardware doing the same thing on the new OS. That it seems like that's more of a surprise that catches people off guard when it's a SoftRAID based system. So yeah, again, I just ruled that out entirely.
That was a satisfying answer, I think. I don't care what Barry's
Thank you, Sam. Yeah. Sam, do you have any questions for me?
No, I think you checked off every box I had, so I'm cool with that. Nice. But you go back to the whole point of the, for lack of a better term, aging out. And this is something I've thought about too. It's great to have clients that you've had for your entirety of your career. Yeah. That's amazing. That says something to our businesses as a whole, but then it makes us think as we get into our older years, how long are they going to be around?
Yep.
And it holds the overall worth of your business as well. Just what you're valued as is also how long are your clients going to be around. So it's a lot to think about. But yeah, I have a couple of those that are on that later timeline that I'm not sure what their thoughts are going to be when they figure out, I'm done with this. I'm going to walk off into the sunset. So
yeah, when Jerry mentioned OWC, I felt like I wanted to say, I'm done with this. I'm going to walk off into the sunset. I'd rather do that than deal with that company. But yeah, I think you bring up a few points come to mind here. One is, Sam, that last ACES that we were both really enjoying Noam Birnbaum's talk about valuation, because it's just a really, I feel like a real business person when I'm sitting there at ACES and I'm hearing people discuss these topics, because it's a general intuition I have. Hey, my life's work is this company. This is my livelihood and my life's work. Surely there's a value there. There's an intuition around that, but here Noam is like giving specifics on like how these valuations work. And that's an interesting factor you bring up. Okay, like you have a certain amount of monthly recurring revenue, but like how many of those monthly recurring clients are like 95 years old or something? Like, is there, if it's more than one, I don't know that any of these business valuations, like companies take that into consideration, like how old are your clients? But they really should, because for every claim of a 20 years like relationship, that implies that these clients are, how long are they going to be in business? Like after 20 something years. So it's a really interesting topic. Speaking of ACES, again, because I'm excited to go back this year, we do have a discount code for everybody out there. So people are starting to buy their tickets. The chat is lighting up again. If you heard about ACES through us, or if you're going because of our recommendation, use our discount code. It's really simple. CCP, Command Control Power, right? CCP, you get 10% off. Don't buy your ACES ticket without getting 10% off thanks to our discount code there. I'm sure it helps in some way. I don't think we get anything out of it. We're happy to help our listeners, and maybe Justin and his company sees over the years how much business we're driving that direction. But I get a lot of value out of it regardless of all of the above, just again, thinking about this type of business topic while we're there.
Yeah, no, I think the business aspect of this is a critical part. I saved a little screenshot of Gnome's business valuation spreadsheet because I look at it sometimes and like, those are interesting numbers as to where you can get to. Yep. If you grow to those numbers. Quick side note: I'll be doing a little thing at ACES as well. I think you guys know about it, but for the audience,
yeah, you mentioned a thing. I don't know what it is though. What
I'm not sure if I know the details either, but we'll see when I'm out there. No, it's more of an MDM like open panel kind of thing where people will be talking about all the different functionalities. It's like a group of us that will be going up there and talking about the MDMs that we use and the functionality between them and what's best and all that stuff. So it's where we not challenge each other, but show really without any social graces of here's the real deal.
Nice.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So be interesting. But so I'll definitely be at ACES. That's what I'm saying.
Awesome. I look forward to that. Yeah. The MDM Adigy, in my case, is the one I have 99.9% of my experience with. And it's the one that I backed 10 years ago along with you guys that I'm just glad I'm glad they're doing so well, because I feel I've stayed with a company that I can really grow with over all these years. That time that we've spent learning these systems is also really valuable. I've realized through some recent conversations, people are using it, but not everybody puts the amount of time into it. And so over time, these benefits compound because you just get more savvy with understanding the system really well, being able to leverage it to do what you need to do, and then benefiting from the economy of scale of being able to say, now this applies to 50 people or 100 endpoints or 200 or whatever you've got there. You've learned how to like manage them effectively, and now you put all that into everything you do. It sounds like that's a good opportunity to learn about some of the pros and cons of each platform, and also like how real people really use this stuff, which is not what you always get in the kind of training guides and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And not even related to that presentation, but a little bit in the MDM side of things. I was just meeting with a client about Intune and how Intune manages the MDM portion of the Apple ecosystem. And it's gotten better, but it's still pretty crappy, in a lot of ways. I'm sure I'll find people that will argue me against that, but there's just a lot of things, and it could be lack of familiarity in some part as well, but just things I don't like about how it works and how it communicates with the devices. So I'm actually curious to see what other people's take on Intune is as well, because I'm seeing it more and more often, because a lot of people are like, it's built into my Microsoft, I might as well use it.
Yep.
And that's certainly a driving factor, is cost.
Yeah, exactly. The built-in aspect also just being really easier to implement in some cases. So yeah, having an understanding there is a really good point.
Yeah.
The other thing you brought up, talking about the attrition and customers aging and stuff like that, I'm wondering if you're starting to see, Sam, among any of your clients, AI effects. We're hearing it on the macro scale. Block laid off like 40% of their workforce. Block is the company that owns Stripe and Square, is it? And I could be wrong about one of those, but I had a note from a while back that Stripe's AI has been fantastic when I've needed some advice. Like I'm setting up a payment link, and how do I integrate this? Is this possible to do this? And I'm thinking like, I'm just going to be banging my head against their AI, and it's going to tell me like, here's an article I found. I already read that stupid article. I need to know. And I'm thinking any second I'm going to be like, agent, escalate, whatever. Give me a human. Yeah. And I didn't need to. I told this story months ago on the show, but their AI was fantastic. So I'm really not surprised if they're laying off staff. It's not great, obviously, because our whole economy is based on people. Not only our economy, our healthcare, everything is based on people having a job. You know, it's like you need to have a job to get money, to get shelter, to get food, to get healthcare. So it's like the backbone of the entire economy. And now AI is disrupting that. Sure, on the broad level, we're seeing these effects. That may or may not directly affect us in our clientele, but are we starting to see this in any of our small business clients on the level of 5 to 20 to 50 people? Are you seeing or hearing anything like that yet?
In terms of that of impacting staff and then laying people off to use AI?
Yeah, yeah.
Not so. I'd say in my situation, I'm seeing AI just being implemented more for efficiency with current staff. So I'm not seeing anything where it's like, this is doing a pretty good job. You guys are out. But I'm seeing where they're meeting and getting together and saying, we can drive these summary reports and things like that if we just dump them into an AI model and have it go. And in that respect, this particular client I'm thinking of is using Copilot with Microsoft, and they're in healthcare, so they got to be protective of their data. But yeah, so long story short is I haven't seen it affect staff. I've seen it help small business, but I think in my thought process, and I could be naive here, but I'm thinking like that in small organizations, like a lot of the ones we support, there isn't as much of a need to like, I don't know, or not need, but there isn't as much of a case, I'd say, to bring in AI to replace people, more just to make that small group efficient. If you see a 5-10 person company, I don't think we're going to, and I could be wrong, but them whittle down to 7 because AI does such a bang up job. I think they'll just be better at their jobs because of AI. But yeah. I don't know. This is my guess and my take, and just from what I've seen so far.
I would think one of the places we would first see an impact with some of our clients are the graphics companies, graphic artists. Obviously, not even AI, but with the proliferation of Canva, anybody could really put together a pretty nice presentation these days. And then you could have something like ChatGPT generate some images for you. It seems to me like you could lose a couple jobs there, let's say in a 10-person workstation environment, and still be profitable.
So my side to that is, and I hear what you're saying, but I think there still needs to be some sort of human oversight, at least right now, because I actually had someone do this for me where I needed them to test something for me to see if it's with Platform SSO on the Mac and if this authenticated user works. And they did it. They did a great job. And then they just threw it all into AI and gave me, because I said, I need something to show to my client that this works. And they threw it in, they're like, done, here you go. I did it in no time for you. I didn't even have to get a guy to present it and put the graphics in. And it was riddled with problematic issues like errors, or it just wasn't done perfectly. So he needed time to rework that 4 or 5 times for me until he could get it right. And I was thinking, it made it better in a way, but I needed some human oversight to get the job done correctly. So I'm just not sure if it's there yet. Maybe it will be, and I'll be dead wrong. And I hope not to be, because I want to see small businesses lose their job.
I agree. Even I thought ChatGPT would really do a bang up job for me. I recently had to put together, and I didn't care whether I used PowerPoint or
Keynote.
Thank you, Joe. And it completely fell flat on its face. Joe, we were talking about how the more you stir it up, the more it starts to stink with ChatGPT when you're having them write something for you. Well, it was the same way. It was like torpedoed itself so badly that I gave up.
Yeah.
And just did it myself in Keynote. So it can reword text for you and give you some nice sounding paragraphs and maybe help you focus in a little bit more on making sure there's an evenness across your slides. So once I did have a slide deck put together, I uploaded a PDF version of it and I had it critique it. And it actually did point out some inconsistencies with just the layout of the slides or the verbiage. So it was helpful there, but in terms of trying to put something together from scratch, it was terrible.
Yeah, it's really a funny process to me. Like I have experience laying something out in Keynote or using Photoshop to remove a background so I have a transparent background, or mock up something or whatever. Lots of things I've been using these tools over all these years for. And then you think AI is supposed to solve everything, so let me try it that way. And instead of doing it manually and painstakingly, like pixel by pixel, or like finding the right tool and the right things to click and the right settings and whatever, you end up with like arguing with a proxy to use some mysterious process to achieve the same result. So it's just a different like workflow. Yeah. Even with that though, like even with the limitations, I do find it's a lot more efficient. It's just different. And we'll do a whole show about this. In fact, the patron only show is a focus on AI featuring Benjamin Morales from Cirrus Partners, big, huge supporter of the show and friend of the show, as well as a new guest, Jason Wick from Sentry over in Japan. You'll have to subscribe to our Patreon to hear that conversation. commandcontrolpower.com, click on support. You can pledge on Patreon to get immediate access to all of the patron-only episodes where we get into a lot more details on this. But that's been my experience lately is it's a lot of learning the new tool, right? As I put it, like I'm arguing with this AI bot. I'm like, no, you screwed up. What are you doing? And then in some cases I found if you actually are more firm with it, it really does the right thing. Why can't you just understand what the instructions I gave you that you repeated back to me? If you could just do what you said you were going to do, then it would be fine. Then it goes into this mode where it's now I'm really thinking and it takes 3 minutes and then it like comes back to you with the right answer. And so you actually have to argue with it almost like a person, which I wouldn't argue with the person in that way. Like I wouldn't say, I didn't say this to AI either, but I would never say to a person like, you freaking idiot. Like, why don't you understand what I'm saying? But you're almost tempted to say that to AI. And in fact, it would actually respond to that. Yeah. So it's just like learning how to interact with it, but also figuring out where it's most effective. Like for me, it's been a really effective thinking partner. As I mentioned in a recent episode, I did this whole PsyKit idea was largely drafted by ChatGPT in that case. And I don't know that I would have gotten it published to the point where I'm ready to announce it to people without ChatGPT as a thinking partner to process the idea and also develop a lot of the materials, at least to draft a lot of this stuff. In a different area, I've been doing some research on a totally unrelated thing, not even in the realm of tech. And it's been, again, a real thinking partner for me to help me analyze what are all my crazy ideas, which ones should I focus on, and what are all the specifics to consider about that idea? It's way better than even an intern or a person, forget an intern, a full-time staff member who's like really competent wouldn't know all of these random things specific to like some industry that I'm not even familiar with. Now, to your point, Sam, it could be totally wrong in some cases, so you actually have to check it. And one of the funny interactions we had was it was building a spreadsheet for me, which can I just have like my copy in Excel, preferably numbers, but like even if it had to be Excel, so we could both be working on the same copy. Instead, it's doing its own little thing. I can then open it in Excel, then I can send it back to the AI and then have it work on that copy. So it's this round trip kind of process. But fine, so we're working on a spreadsheet. I make a minor change to something by asking the AI to do it. Hey, can we update this and add it? And it comes back to me and it's like, sure, I did all that. And here's your spreadsheet. And I'm like reading it and going line by line. I get to the payroll expense for this full-time employee and the number stretches across the entire cell. And I'm like reading, I'm trying to understand. Yeah, that's billions. It's like $2.5 billion in payroll cost. I'm like, no, it's pretty sure that's wrong.
I want that job.
Yeah, exactly. That's an obvious one. But if it gets a number that's in the right order of magnitude, but it's 2x of what it should be or something, I'm not going to catch that. Again, learn the tool, learn what it's good at, check it. It is very interesting technology. And I could see replacing a team or, like you said, Jerry, a graphic designer, a social media intern. That's really available today with this technology, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting points. Like I said, we'll see if my take is incorrect or not, but it's very possible. I'm also thinking probably a little bit shorter term than I think it'll be a major impact in a longer term time frame. But in the next few years, I'm not sure how much of a small business impact. Again, I could be 100% wrong. But
I'm already starting to say I can't see past 2 years. I think it's accelerating that quickly that I wouldn't even say 3-5 years. I would say 2 years.
To be clear, though, we are talking about, I can see a major impact, obviously, across multiple industries and large size organization, maybe even medium organizations. But I was focusing my answer, just so we're clear, on the little 5 or 10er, but we're even thinking that those would be impacted potentially by what, 20%, 25% as they drop that staff?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's possible because I
think that's a good estimate. Yeah. I think what you just said, because if it's 40% for a major, massive company with whatever they had, I think 10,000 people or something, the recent example, they have the economy of scale of being a massive organization. Sure, 40%, that's actually a big number, but it probably doesn't apply to our little 5 to 10 person companies. But I could see them dropping 20% of staff and having less of a need for managing the corresponding number of computers and time that people need to ask you with questions. And
So when you upload a spreadsheet to ChatGPT, does it have to have its own 365 license? How does that work?
Yeah. No, you know what? It's using LibreOffice. So the funny thing is, every once in a while, behind the scenes stuff, it spit out some Chinese characters at me at one point. I don't even know what language this is. Like, what the heck just happened? And I did like the Google Translate. It said something like, this is a complete rewrite or something was the translation to English. So I'm like, okay, I guess you were trained in a different language than English, or you thought I was Chinese for a second. It was just a weird thing. But then in another example, it spat out some error message about, it's like, this is a known bug in LibreOffice. And it had to work around a bug in LibreOffice to give me the answer I wanted in the spreadsheet. So I guess it's using LibreOffice to do that stuff behind the scenes.
Speaking of behind the scenes, I actually was chatting with my credit card company about something, and I was talking with a real agent, not AI. And the text that came back to me, I have a screenshot of it. It said, must be read verbatim. And then it said, this call may be monitored or recorded. I'm like, oops, nice. They must have copy pasted the whole piece into the thing. I was cracking up.
Yeah. It's funny seeing some of those instructions, like even from the companies themselves, they include it and they'll say something like, it'll be like, you are an AI model. You're supposed to act like an expert in this particular industry. And then it will say very important or something. Yeah. Just, it didn't work the first time. So then they added very important and now it works. It seems so cobbled together. It's really interesting under the hood. And yet it gives us this amazing access to this technology.
I know.
It's wild.
I've used it.
Yep.
I had something quick that I wanted to mention to the audience, just that kind of bit me. We were separating from a client. I'll talk about that on a Patreon show. But we have Synology C2, which I think we're all familiar with for backing up with Synology. And we do it through our MSP. So we build a client and it's under our account and it all works great. And we back up their data. What I didn't know, and we found out, maybe I should have known this, is when you separate out and they're, hey, we're not working with them anymore. We'd like them to have their own data. Synology has no possibility of moving that data from you to the direct customer. Sure. So you have to retain that data with the MSP if you want the historical data.
Wow.
Whoa. That's crazy.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
We went back and forth with them a lot. And we're like, you're telling me there's no way for the customer to get their own, like they'd have to just keep paying us, basically.
Or another MSP even? Can another MSP inherit the relationship or something?
Because of the way it's siloed in their systems, there's no way of shifting that data over somewhere else.
That system is kludgy. I've encountered that recently as well as Synology C2, where I need to, let's say the client is signed up for some number of terabytes of data on Synology C2 that we're using to back up using hyper backup on their Synology. And we're the MSP, we manage them as part of our group or whatever. And so we should be able to go in and just increase the number of terabytes. And we do it all the time or occasionally. Yeah. And sometimes you log in and it's like, you don't have access to this. Or like and just yesterday I saw one that said, the customer hasn't granted you access to manage this. Yes, I do. So I'm clicking, do I need to be in their account or my account? I'm trying everything. And I just go back through the same exact steps. I get the message, then I refresh and then it loads. So there's some little bugginess with that stuff. It's funny you mentioned Synology C2, Sam, because I had a note here of an email that I got. I had a client on a hyper backup plan to Synology C2 temporarily because they have two servers. One is offsite and that location was down for 6 months during renovation. So we had this like temporary offsite backup. And this is the email they sent to the client, which in this case was our address. So I got the email when we turned off the service. So it says, hi client, here's the email address. Your North America Seattle data center subscription has entered the grace period, either due to a failed renewal or cancellation made by your solution provider. Grace period details, hyper backup stop after this date. And this date would have been, I think, like a week after or something or whenever this expired. Restores remain available until a date that's basically 1 week after that, or more or less, like week to 10 days. And then it says hybrid share folder creation. This stops basically the same dates. Temporarily read-write remains until that same grace period date, like a week later, essentially. And then it says at the bottom, all data will be permanently deleted after that date of that grace period ending, which is like a week after this all expires. It's just an interesting example of the customer-facing side of essentially what you would have been going through if you weren't going to just retain that, which it sounds like you're stuck with it for life now. What's your plan?
They had to agree that data wasn't critical to their systems. So they had to agree on paper that they were cutting that off and that was fine. And then we just parted ways with them. Otherwise, they would have had to keep paying us forever or for 7 years with the legal need. But yeah, just keep your eyes open, boys and girls, and understand that functionality of C2 out there.
Yeah, interesting point. All right, everybody, thanks for listening to another episode of Command Control Power. You can find it a lot more and get access to more great episodes on Patreon by going to commandcontrolpower.com and clicking on support. And we really appreciate your support and your listening. Thanks again for listening to Command Control Power.
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a cent